What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And in the thumbnail is a picture of my friend, my homeboy, Giovanni Olano, aka Pollo, from Westside 18th Street in San Mateo. And unfortunately, his life was ended earlier this month while he was incarcerated in El Salvador by the authorities, from my understanding down there. I don't have any other details, just the authorities, right? And so, it's a rough prison system down there, for sure. And I've talked about him a little bit before. I've talked about 18th Street a little bit, and I'm gonna do a little bit of both. This video's about him, but it's kind of about my friend and some reflections on that. But I know that the 18th Street conversation sometimes gets a little confusing for people that maybe aren't from the Bay Area or just aren't too familiar. And I think in particular, as time goes on, fewer and fewer people are familiar because the 18th Street in San Francisco presence is not what it was in the 80s and the 90s, right? And so people kind of forget about it or just don't know. So I'll get into some of that too. But for Pollo, we met in Juvenile Hall, same place I met a handful of Westside 18th Street dudes from San Mateo. We met in Hillcrest Juvenile Hall, late 80s, pre-teens. I don't remember exactly how old, but we were kids, man. We were babies. And the way he looks in that picture is pretty similar to the way that I remember him from then. I've seen him later in prison. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's like how he looked as kids, had long hair, right? And greasy. Man, in the hall, cats put Vaseline in their hair to hold it down and just greasy. But the look on his face is kind of the look he always had, right? Somewhat of a smile. He was generally in a pretty good mood. Funny guy, sense of humor, crack jokes, with the business. He's a little guy, but he'll get down in a heartbeat. But all around a cool dude. We were cellies a little bit in Juvenile Hall, hung out, played a little foosball type of thing. And he was a good dude. We kicked it in the streets a little bit. Westside 18th Street in San Mateo, not to be confused with Westside San Mateo, which is a completely different gang. They beefed with everybody in San Mateo. Everybody. You had like Shoreview, the Crips, which was a lot of Polynesians, but they had other folks that weren't Polynesian that were also Crips over in that area. You had Westside San Mateo, which was like some people just kind of claimed Westside. Others in that group were Norteños, but again, this is late 80s, early 90s, so it was just banging. It wasn't necessarily really sophisticated. It was really dangerous. It was really active. But some of these kind of identities and terms and shifting around was kind of percolating in different spots in the Bay, right? So it was just the era of gangbanging, and everybody was fighting everybody for the most part. There was no such thing as no red on red or any of that. And so you had 18th Street in the city, right? That were Norteños early on, right? Definitely were Norteños. Like the first documented taking out, if you will, of a Southsider in San Francisco was by cats who banged 18th Street. And all Central Americans, right? For the most part, at least. And it's a trip because the same stuff that led to 18th Street in Southern California becoming what we know it as now, right? Because the 18th Street itself been around a long time. But the wave of folks from Central America, especially El Salvador, really changed the landscape of what 18th Street down there, was and is. And it eventually gave birth to, Mata as well. But same thing happened up here in the city, right? That same wave also hit San Francisco. And a lot of the same factors, right? Cats were banging, they were in the streets, and a lot of Mexicans in the Mission District, a little further up. And they were Norteños, even before they were Norteños. Those hoods been around a long time, but they were Norteños too. And so them and 18 would fight all the time, right? Over just Central American versus Mexican type beef. It didn't matter that they were both Norteños. Then you started to have, a couple Southsiders here and there, and 18th Street would bang on them, So there's another channel, Swag Jr. He just started his channel. He's got like a couple hundred subscribers, I think. I first seen him over on Jay's channel, Renegade Media. he's Central American. He's from San Francisco. He's a little bit younger. He's done state time and fed time, both, I believe. But I think he'll probably be talking more about this stuff and have more to say and more insight, you know. But this is just from my vantage point, from my angle of what I remember as a kid. So they were kind of beefing with everybody, and eventually some of those cats from 18 in the city really pulled back on the whole Norte thing, right? Because they were beefing with all the other Norteños, and so I think they kind of pulled back on that night. I think some of them did really sort of pull back on it, and still banged 18, but wasn't tripping off the Norte part, and still beefed with Southsiders. And now that 18th Street is pretty much gone. You know, I'm only aware of one guy from 18th Street in the city who is even in the system in California. I don't know of anybody banging it on the streets the way that they were then. Could be, but I'm not aware of it. But some of those guys from the city came down, some of those families, right, Central Americans, came down to San Mateo, right? And there was a whole little apartment complex, right, at the borderline of San Mateo and Burlingame. You know, if you're going north up El Camino, it's right there. Bunch of big old trees and stuff. And that was a big kicking spot. And I went over there a few times. I hung out over there. I hung out with Pollo over there, other guys from Westside 18th Street. Sometimes the guys from Westside 18 in San Francisco would come down. So there was a relationship between the two. But the ones in San Mateo was serious about that red rag, right? They were Norteños. Again, the ones in the city were as well, but that kind of shifted for some of them. In San Mateo, it never really shifted. They stayed, you know, they stayed Norteños through it all, and they were never the deepest hood. But I've been in situations with Pollo where I'll take him, you know, one or two 18th Street cats by my side against a whole, you know, busload of Westside San Mateo dudes, and I'm talking about then. So don't come in set tripping this and that. I'm talking about events 30-something years ago, man. But anyways, for Pollo, we hung out in the hall, and he was a cool guy. We hung out in the streets, you know, a little bit, not a whole lot, but a bit. And then fast forward, and he went to YA, I went to prison, and I'm in reception center, San Quentin, winter of '96, and here comes Pollo, right, Carson section. Pretty sure he was coming straight from the Y, but he shows up. Sorry about that. And he only has 2 tattoos. He has XV3 inside of his finger, right? You guys remember when that kind of stuff was popular. And then he had the little 3 dots on his wrist. And so the homeboys were questioning if he was really a homeboy. And I talked about this in my San Quentin video when I barely first started my channel. But I'll go over it again here, you know, briefly. So he, those were his only tattoos. And so they were questioning, man, is he even a homeboy? Maybe he's trying to slide through. You know, maybe he's 18 from Southern California, which is kind of a ridiculous idea. You know, San Quentin was segregated at the time, right? The Southsiders had half of West Block, and Northerners had the other half. Carson section, it was, you know, it was what it was. There was no Southsiders or anything over there, so they wouldn't have put him there. But nonetheless, you know, so I spoke up, and I was like, no, man, that's the homeboy. Like, I know him from the streets. I know him from, you know, juvenile hall, and he went to YA. He's definitely a homeboy, right? So I said for the San Mateo cats, there was never any question of, are they still rocking with the North or not, you know? So they say, okay, fine, and he gets cleared, you know? And then it comes time to go to yard one day, and it's raining, it's cold outside, it's miserable going to that Carson section yard in San Quentin. When the weather's bad, you're right on the water, it's horrible. He didn't want to go outside. And like I say, he was a funny dude, great sense of humor, quick to get off. You know, little guy, but he'll get off. But he also did not like authority. And that's probably true for all of us to some degree, but he didn't like being told what to do. And I remember him getting into it with counselors in the hall all the time, just for how they talked to him or them telling him to go lock up or whatever else. And he would just throw a fit. So, anyways, he decides he's not going to go to yard, but it's mandatory movement. And he doesn't go because he didn't have the clothes to be warm. And so he gets in trouble. And the homeboys decided to just go in there, send a couple people in there, put some hands on him in the cell, kind of tune him up a bit. And then whenever we would go to chow over the next few days, We go to the chow hall, bring back some food for him and stuff until he didn't have any marks or anything. And they didn't really mark his face up, a whole lot anyways, but just so he wouldn't get, rolled up for looking like he was in a fight. And then we parted ways from Quentin, and he was on good terms and good standings at that point. I don't know what happened throughout the rest of his prison career. One of his homeboys, Tigre, we used to call him Coco, but in prison he changed his name to Tigre from Westside 18th Street in San Mateo. He wanted to become an NF member and was actually my cellie in the courtroom shoot, my first cellie. And I talk about him in my courtroom video. But we all just, all around that same time, man, we all kind of knew each other and rubbed shoulders, and it's just a trip how life took us. But, obviously at some point, Pollo got deported, which is not unusual, so got deported. And my understanding of kind of how it works down there for Norteños is you just go down there and either stay out of the mix, like don't really get involved with the gangs or any of that other kind of stuff, or you kind of fall in line with what the program is in that country, right? And so you don't have Norteños down there setting up Norteño gangs, but it also not necessarily that, you're a Norteño and you go down there and you're just going to get blasted, because you're a Norteño, right? It's a different culture. It's a different environment. I bet it would be kind of a trip, though, right? To be a part of a gang called 18th Street and be from Central America and be a Norteño and then go down there, where obviously, again, there's an 18th Street. But from what I heard, at least in recent years, he hadn't really been messing around down there too much. But I honestly don't know. I don't know. We know with Bukele and all that, a lot of folks are getting snatched up. A lot of folks are losing their life at the hands of the government. So just because he was in prison didn't necessarily mean he was doing anything wrong. I don't know. There's not really any more details. But that's about it, man. I just want to kind of put it out there. He was a friend. And when I got the call, for one, it caught me out of nowhere. Like, it's not a call I was expecting, obviously. And he's somebody that I talk about, now and then. And I have some people, off of YouTube that I talk to about him and stuff. So it's not as if I hadn't thought of him or mentioned his name in all this time. But I never thought I'd get a call that he had passed. And it's a trip. I've said this before when folks in my peer group, have lost their life prematurely, right? Normally because of violence. You get to the age where you don't expect that stuff anymore. When you're young, it's different. But I'm 46. We're pushing 50, and you just don't expect to get calls about, childhood friends dying in jail or dying in the streets or anything else, and it sucks. It really does. And I thought I'd share with you guys about my friend, man, Pollo. I felt like he deserved it. He was a good kid. We had some good times. We had some laughs, and it was fun. I don't encourage or condone gangbang, don't get me wrong, but for the hands that we were dealt as kids and the environments that we were in, he was one of those people that I had a good time with, and I can't say that about everybody, so anyways, rest in peace, man, to my friend Giovani. You guys take care. Help others move with excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. And help your community because they need you. Take care.